The Shrek franchise is a political epic about the struggles of the working class, the evils of fascism, and the competing branches of an ideology. While an understudied subject, the politics of Shrek has been covered by some, though this will be a deeper analysis than any before, and we'll be analyzing the first three Shrek films. In Shrek 1's opening scene, Shrek and other fairy tale creatures like him are shown to be a marginalized working class group with little rights, with the fairy tale creatures being turned in by peasants for money and sent to crowd Shrek's land. Duloc is a fascist society in which even human peasants have more rights than the fairy tale creatures. The ruler of Duloc, Lord Farquaad, is soon introduced, being shown torturing the gingerbread man for information on the whereabouts of the fairy tale creatures, saying he wants to snuff them out as they poison his perfect world. Reminiscent of bigoted dictators in our world. I think it's interesting that Farquaad is shown to be very short, approximately 5'6", with his anger over this fact being referenced throughout the film. I believe this is an homage to the fact that so often those being steered towards extremism do it out of spite and a feeling of inadequacy, with an Oxford study showing short people are mistrustful of others and prone to paranoia. The main characters, Shrek and Donkey's paths soon cross, with both being victims of Farquaad's fascist regime. When Donkey asks Shrek his name, Shrek at first hesitates. This symbolizes the fact that Shrek is an everyman, so low on the social ladder that perhaps he was never even given a name in the first place, making it up on the spot.
Donkey and Shrek represent two different ideologies within the social movement, with Donkey taking on a more radical, revolutionary stance of fairy tale supremacy, and Shrek taking a more diplomatic approach, willing to work hand in hand with all social groups to achieve equality. These dual mindsets are shown when Donkey expresses interest in grinding Farquaad's bones, and Shrek refuses. A real-world example of this conundrum would be Malcolm X's Donkey, and Shrek as Martin Luther King.
Shrek is unwillingly thrust into a leadership position among the fairy tale people when they're forced to flood his swamp and he wants them gone, so he and Donkey go off to Duloc to find Farquaad. Upon arriving at Duloc's entrance, they're presented with turnstiles you'd see at an amusement park, immediately giving a fake feeling to the town. Once they enter, they see Duloc is completely barren, a reference to the fact that although regimes build up their societies to be flourishing, on the inside they're cold, desolate places. A good example of this is North Korea's capital, Pyongyang, as well as the fact that they built an entire village out of empty buildings and pretended that shit was real. Farquaad tells Shrek that if he rescues Princess Fiona and brings her to him, he will be given the deed to his swamp back. Fiona represents unity between classes. She's first presented as a stuck-up princess, though she was affected by the same fascist system that Shrek was oppressed under despite her class, being locked away in a tower her entire life. That soon being revealed that at nighttime, Fiona is an ogre just like Shrek. Unfortunately, however, a rift is drawn between Shrek, Fiona, and Donkey due to a misunderstanding, representing how propaganda serves to divide us and keeps progress from being made.
The rift between Shrek and Donkey comes to a head at the swamp, where Donkey senses dividing the swamp between his half and Shrek's half, as they butt heads in feud. This is a representation of the infighting between leftists that often keeps them from gaining power, both the division between social and classes, as well as the journey toward
Eventually, Shrek and Donkey talk out their differences and come to an agreement that the only way to bring down the fascist regime is unity. Just then, the dragon promptly arrives and takes them back to Fiona. The dragon represents the sheer power of the revolutionaries in this sense, with it being able to hamper the movement as it attacked Shrek earlier in the film, or lead them to glory, as it does now that the divisions have been mended. At the end of the film, Farquaad is eaten by the dragon and the revolution is successful. Fiona then turns into an ogre permanently, showing that despite differences in class, we can all work together to create a beautiful society. Shrek 2 opens with Shrek and Fiona being invited to meet Fiona's parents in Far Far Away, which is a satirization of capitalism and America, with various parodies of popular American chain stores being present in the city, as well as a critique of US police brutality.
En route to Far Far Away, Donkey displays disappointment with Shrek's meeting at the bourgeoisie.
For 5 minutes. Could you not be yourself? For 5 minutes!
Fiona spinning.
When Shrek and Fiona arrive at Far Far Away, Fiona's parents are horrified to see their ogres, symbolizing the bourgeoisie's disgust for revolutionaries. This culminates in a fight between Shrek and King Harold, causing Fiona to run away in tears over the socio-economic division. Soon after, King Harold is approached by the fairy godmother, who urges him to have Shrek assassinated.
The fairy godmother represents capitalism and bloodthirsty intrigue that happens behind its closed doors, threatening Harold's life to carry out the assassination. This symbolizes the United States' tendency to assassinate foreign leaders in its so-called pursuit of peace. Her capitalistic tendencies are further shown when she attempts to lure Fiona with consumerism.
Ultimately, the assassination fails, and Shrek breaks into a factory where he finds a happily ever after potion, which he consumes in the hopes that Fiona and her parents will like him. Shrek falls for a capitalist ploy, and in his desperation to fit into the establishment, he loses his revolutionary spirit, represented by him turning into a human. Prince Charming, who was originally supposed to marry Fiona, then arrives and takes her for himself while posing as Shrek, representing both the evils of tradition and the deceitful nature of capitalistic leftist societies that claim to represent the working man while utilizing an economic system directly opposed to the working man. The fairy godmother has a backroom meeting with King Harold, where she tells him Fiona must fall into her capitalistic and traditionalist clutches and fall in love with Prince Charming, which represents turning society against the working class and the equality they propose. Shrek and Donkey are caught overhearing this, and they're locked in prison. Soon after, however, Shrek is broken out of prison by revolutionaries, for although the establishment despises him, he has won the people's hearts. The film ends with Shrek and Fiona reuniting, and shredding themselves of their new human skin, and thus capitalism, returning to their revolutionary ideology. Shrek 3 begins with the death of King Harold, with Shrek being the first in line to inherit the kingdom. Shrek is disgusted with the idea of ruling and thus becoming the establishment, being content as an activist and man of the people, and thus Shrek searches for Arthur, the only other suitable successor. Prince Charming, furious over the death of his mother, vows to become king of Far Far Away, believing it's what he deserves, as that's what's been drilled into his head his entire life, a victim of traditionalism.
Charming lives in a bonafide non-contingent harassment. First distrustful of Charming, he soon sways them to his cause with a charismatic, Hitler-esque speech, stating their side of the story hasn't been told, and it's time they got their happily ever after. The Republicans are a charismatic figure as all the country needs to be pulled towards extremism, and agree on something to vote for the problems, with cultural Germany being a prime example. Meanwhile, Shrek learns from Fiona that she's pregnant, which terrifies Shrek. He has a nightmare running cruising, a large amount of babies pop up in the swamp, representing the spread of different communist ideologies and Karl Marx's efforts to contain them. At one point, a baby holds a book upside down and speaks to Shrek in gibberish, representing many communist misunderstandings of the Communist Manifesto. In the final nightmare sequence, Shrek stands naked with a crowd of babies cheering for him while he stands in horror, despite what Karl Marx would feel if he was alive today and saw all the different communist movements misrepresenting his ideals.
Back in Far Far Away, Prince Charming brings the mob he gathered from the pub and launches an assault on the city, bombing it and storming the castle, seizing the kingdom for himself. This represents the devastating power displayed by Germany's blitzkrieg during World War II. Shrek and his entourage attempt a coup, but are captured by Charming. Just before Charming is about to kill Shrek, Arthur arrives and convinces the discontent crowd that they don't have to be villains or look for a scapegoat, and that they can be accepted into society instead of being outcasts. Inspired, the mob gives up their fascist ways. Suddenly, however, Charming lunges at Arthur with his sword, but Shrek heroically pushes Arthur out of the way and takes the blow, piercing his chest before falling to the ground as a pool of blood slowly spreads from underneath him, and the camera zooms out as the credits roll. As a humble advocator who denied what could have been vast amounts of power, Shrek gave his life for the movement, as so many civil rights heroes have done in reality.